We're now joined by another great guest in John Kurtz, Kansas City Sports Network. He joins us on 365 Sports. John, thank you very much, as always. When you look at K-State's schedule, what is the reaction, or what was the initial reaction among fans, among you, among those who are at K-State?
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. I mean, I think it's manageable. I think it feels to me kind of middle of the road as far as how the difficulty could actually play out here with this. A couple of things jump out. Obviously, the two buys that everybody has with the way the schedule breaks this year are nice. I think fans look at it and say, okay, well, the Arizona game being on a Friday, that's polarizing. I know it says 13th or 14th right now. I would just tell you, I can almost guarantee you that game's going to wind up being on a Friday, which to me is actually kind of cool. I sort of like the idea of that. It's going to be a non-conference game for those that are not aware because it had been scheduled so far out in advance. I like the idea of having a Friday standalone potential top 20 kind of matchup between Arizona and K-State there. Now, K-State's going to have to go to Tulane before that, so that won't be easy. We know what happened the last time those two played, and that game was in Manhattan. So they'll have to get by that first. But I think that could be a really cool kind of matchup for the Big 12 and the kind of thing that they're trying to work out with the schedule and this type of thing that they need. So you have that one that's polarizing. I think the other one that people look at is the Kansas game being on October 26th as opposed to later on in November. Typically, lately here it's been that week right around Thanksgiving. So you move that game up. I actually kind of like that, not having Kansas and Iowa State back-to-back, like having back-to-back really tough rivalry games, especially, I mean, that Iowa State rivalry's got some added juice to it now after the last couple of weeks. So I would say, okay, I think it's decent. You knew that this was going to be a year where the home schedule was a little bit lighter. I think the other reaction that I've heard a lot about is just from the staff's perspective, it's not the most conducive schedule for recruiting because they go from September 28th to October 26th without a home game. So it's a long period without having a home game for fans. It's kind of the best stretch weather-wise that you might be able to get people out there to a game and just have an impressive environment. But the other thing is they only had 6 home games in the first place, so aka less official visit recruiting weekends, and then one of them will likely get knocked out with Arizona, with that game being on a Friday. So they're just going to have less opportunities to host recruits. I think that can be a tricky thing to work through. But, semantics, we're getting pretty far down in the weeds as far as all that goes. Myself personally, I love, and I already knew these were coming, but it is kind of cool to see them be in the first 2 road trips of the year in conference play. But I love getting to go to Provo. I love getting to go to Boulder. I've been to Boulder for football games a couple of times. Very excited to get back there. And then obviously the trip to Provo have heard nothing but amazing things. And since the day that we found out BYU was coming, that's a road trip I've wanted to make.
John, the between Kansas and Iowa State stretch is, at least right now on paper, pretty favorable for them. So, like you mentioned, they're not back-to-back, but between is at Houston, by Arizona State, and Cincinnati. Do you think that would maybe enable them to kind of buffer whatever happens between those 2 games?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is by far, on paper, the most manageable stretch of the schedule. You kind of feel like all of it, I know I saw some fans talking about, hey, the back half seems easier than the first half. I'm like, well, you're dividing it up half by half. I mean, that back half does include at West Virginia, at Iowa State, and Kansas at home. I mean, that's still pretty tough, even though I understand the thought with the first part being at Tulane, the Arizona game, 2 road trips to Colorado and BYU, and then a home game with Oklahoma State, which may well be the most difficult game of the season when it's all said and done. So I feel like it's split pretty evenly. But yeah, especially when you throw in the bye week there, they just have a lot of time to kind of recover, hopefully get well. And you say that, I don't know. I mean, I think Willie Fritz is an excellent football coach. So Houston may well be pretty improved there, and I certainly don't want to run down Arizona State and Cincinnati either. But getting those games back to back at home, coming off of a bye week, feels like a pretty favorable stretch for them there. And yeah, I mean, that Iowa State game, it's November 30th. We just played a snow game last year between K-State and Iowa State. Now you're going to get them with the potential, I suppose, for a snow game and just a really cold, exactly what you would think of in a game between K-State and Iowa State at the end of the year in Ames. I mean, that's not going to be easy at all. And I think Kansas certainly is a league title contender pending the health of Jalen Daniels too. So those 2 games that bookended will not be easy by any stretch of the imagination.
For all of the complaints about not having Farmageddon as a protected rivalry, there it is at the very end of the year, John, in a prominent spot to close out the season. Has that kind of come and gone? I mean, it wasn't a big to-do, really, but some of the backlash, has that cooled off when it comes to not having that as one of the protected rivalries?
It's weird because I think I have a different opinion on it than most of the fan base. You know, most of the fan base seem to be really upset about it.
Yes.
And I get it. I mean, I understand why people are, because it is these days a really intense rivalry between the fan bases. There have been a lot of really good, really close games that the teams have played over the last decade, and it's a game that has been played forever. You know, one of the longest continuous games that has been played in college football right now. I understand all that. I guess I had just kind of moved to the place of like, hey, we're in a totally different era of college football right now, and like, if you haven't noticed, traditions being thrown out the window left and right. You know, we've had Texas and Texas A&M stop playing. We're going to have Bedlam ending, right? Kansas and Missouri have not been playing. So nothing against K-State and Iowa State, but it does not have the historical significance of games like that have already gone by the wayside. So I just feel like I had already more adapted to the new reality of the world that we live in now. So it didn't really bother me too much. And I'm also thinking, I mean, hey, you're going to be playing them 3 out of 4 years. Like, it's not like this thing is going away all the time. So I was not as beat up as everybody else was. I think when the schedule came back out, you know, I saw a little bit of grumbling about that, with people kind of being like, oh, hey, yeah, remember, this isn't going to be a permanent thing here. And again, especially with, you know, the stuff that's happened in basketball has fired up the fan bases again. So it does kind of come in on the heels of that. So I think most fans are still probably a little perturbed by that. It just doesn't bother me personally quite as much as I think it did a lot of people.
You brought up basketball, and if you don't mind, my final question for you is everything last year was pretty smooth. Obviously, there's been drama. We discussed it with you last time when the basketball team, the player being suspended and eventually now playing at Louisville. It's been a tough run so far. Jerome Tang last night saying that loss to Oklahoma was on him. How difficult is it right now with what's going on at K-State in basketball?
It's really tough. I mean, it's by far the most significant stretch of adversity that Jerome Tang's hit since he's been here. They had not had a 3-game losing streak under Tang until right now. And, you know, the first game there, you know, they were coming off of winning 4 of the first 5 in Big 12 play. And I thought, and this team's playing a lot better than the sum of its parts, because you mentioned they lost Naquan Tomlin. That's a guy who's probably going to be playing in the NBA, and they changed to a 5-out offense to try and basically work it around both he and Arthur Kaluma, who came in and transferred. And so, you know, you lost the guy that you kind of built the new offense around. And then Quez Glover, I think, was a really important piece that they pulled in at guard when they didn't get Joe Toussaint, who they really wanted and felt like they had right toward the end until Texas Tech kind of outbid them for him. I think they felt like they needed another guard. They needed someone to handle the ball more, to let Tyler Perry play off the ball. So they bring in Quez Glover, who at one point was committed to BYU, and he's had 2 knee injuries. He's only played a little bit in 1 exhibition game. And so you never got that. And so now Tyler Perry's he's basically playing out of position at point guard and just doesn't have the size or athleticism, I think, to be as effective as you would want him to be there. And he's not giving you nearly as much shooting. So they just have a lot of problems. And I thought, man, how they've won 4 of the first 5 Big 12 games. I mean, that's a real testament to Jerome Tang and the job he's been able to do. But now you lose 3 straight. One of them in Ames, that was a 1 to 2 possession game with 2 minutes left. I mean, going right down to the wire. I think it was a 2-point game with 2 minutes left in Ames. But Houston and Oklahoma blown out. The offensive struggles are coming back. They've had 2 games that looked like last night. It was last night and then Nebraska, where they only scored less than 50 points. They just have offensive struggles. They're a pretty good defensive team, but there's just not enough offense there. And they really, I mean, they didn't score a single point until after the first 2 media timeouts last night against Oklahoma. So just having some moments, man. And when you combine that with, everything that happened with Naquan Tomlin, the president of the university, TJ Otzelberger, Jerome Tang also did call out an official by name after the game against Houston, and I think has since walked that back a little bit. It just feels like there's been a lot of worrying about things that are kind of outside of their control. And I understand it. I mean, I totally get it. They've been dealt a really, really rough hand this year. But I do wonder and kind of hope if now, last night was a bit of a wake up call and kind of just taking the tone from Jerome Tang after the game where he said, like, hey, man, that's on me. We've got to be better with all this. I kind of hope and wonder if it's going to be like we've got to get back to just worry about what we can control, keep all this stuff in-house, and try to maybe change some things. I don't know. We'll see if they're able to change anything with the offense to get some more consistency there. But they've got enough of a resume, I think, and enough left on the schedule, obviously, to still make the tournament if they can get it turned back around. But they're going to have to play considerably better than what they have the last 2 games.
As always, great stuff. Thank you, John. Appreciate your time. John Kurtz, KC Sports Network, with us on K-State, the football.